Good evening. Welcome to this evening's accelerated master's and doctoral program session. And the session that we have today is on the role of theory, theoretical and conceptual frameworks in scholarly research. So basically what the session will do is just speak to you about the spaces or the places in your study where theory will make an appearance, and I will speak to you about how theory exists in each of these areas within your study. Then, of course, there are two theoretical framings that relate to research, and you hear people talk about theoretical framework, you hear people talk about conceptual frameworks, and we will decipher those two things tonight so that you get a good sense of what theoretical and conceptual frameworks are and how they relate to your work. Once again, my name is Professor Tennyson Mokuchini. I hope to take about an hour to present this session. Of course, what will happen is, as per usual, those of you who've attended my sessions know that I will do many more slides than the ones that I speak to. The reason being that when you access them outside of my presence, you'll be able to make the connections that I might have drawn your attention to during the spoken version of the presentation. With that said, I will also be open to taking questions. You'll note on your gadget that you've got a Q&A tab that allows you to pose questions with the expectation that I will provide answers to you at the end of the session. So please begin posting your questions as early as possible, so when we get to the end of the session, it is very clear what questions I need to attend to. Then, as per normal, I will of course be turning off the camera now, so you can focus exclusively on the presentation that you have for the evening. And once we have finished the presentation, I will put my camera back on to deal with your questions. Without any further delay, I will take off my camera now and just orientate you to the material that we need to look at. And I am getting a little bit of a technical hitch here. I'm trying to share my screen with you, and for some reason it's not doing as it ought to, but worry not, I have an option that I must pursue. Right. Okay. Right, and I will now turn off the camera. I hope that you're able to see the presentation. And once again, I've indicated that the session today is focusing on the role of theory in research, and we'll of course look at theoretical and conceptual frameworks. This was initially designed as a two-part session, but we've put it together in a single-part session with the expectation that later on the program, we will do more of a workshop type of session to allow you to ask questions much more in a live setting, and for you to present specific issues that relate to your individual studies. So, once again, I've said that we're focusing on the utilization of theory, and I've put it as theory in a PhD, but the concepts and the utilization of theory is almost the same in a master's level study, but there are different types of masters that people do, and for that reason, I've not indicated that this has to do with the master's level study, but I will of course clarify the differences in how theory is utilized in the different types of study formats. Then, of course, the other thing that we will touch on by virtue of the presentation that you have in front of you is we will look at the role of theoretical gaps and how theoretical gaps exist to assist you in refining your study focus. As always, we'll start with some definitional issues just related to theory, so we can speak and clarify what theory is seen as. Then, of course, we'll talk about the exploration of how theory is operated within a thesis or a dissertation, and it's explicitly in very specific dissertations. So those of you who are doing a master's level program where the master's is entirely about research, so you don't attend and you don't complete any other modules, you are just doing a research dissertation for your master's. That master's is essentially takes the same pathway in every shape and form to a doctoral thesis. But any other student doing a different master's, and we sometimes call this master's or a dissertation of limited scope, or sometimes people will talk about a different variant, which is a course-based master's. These latter variants have a smaller research expectation on the student, so the way the role that theory plays in those types of masters is substantially different from what it would be like in a full doctoral thesis or in a full research master's dissertation. I will then, of course, look at the role of theory and then look at where in your work you will have opportunity to apply theory. And in that space, we will also have a chance to focus very explicitly on the differentiation between theoretical frameworks and conceptual frameworks. To start off, theory is seen as an abstract generalization that offers a systematic explanation for how phenomena are related. So we believe and accept that when someone theorizes or offer a theory, that theory has two very specific purposes. One, it is the theory that anyone puts forward is to help explain a phenomena. And of course, the theory assists you with predicting what future behavior that's related to that phenomena is. So any theory, when anyone makes any theory, that theory has two basic purposes. One is to explain what they think is going on. Two, to assist in any predictive analysis that may occur. So, and remember I've said theory is an abstract generalization that offers a systematic explanation for how phenomena are interrelated. So if I had a theory about how physical strength is distributed between the genders, that theory that I put forward about physical strength and how it is distributed between different genders, that theory serves two purposes, either to explain the phenomena I'm talking about, but it also gives you enough insight for you to see what's going on, so you can predict. And clearly, from just the fact that theory helps you to explain, it helps you to predict, tells you something. That when you are entering a point of study, you are entering a point of study with an ambition of explaining what is going on, what has necessitated your study. So theory is involved at that point of the explanation. And then, of course, when you get your results and you think you know what's going on, you will develop a theory or use a range of theories to assist you in offering an explanation. So you realize that at the very least, theory has this explanatory function and this prediction function. Right, this summary by Walker and Avant pretty much says the same thing, that theory is useful for offering a systematic view that is useful for describing, for explaining, for predicting, for prescribing, and for controlling things. So basically, as you can tell, theory really is about offering explanations of what's going on, offering prescriptions about what is, predictions about what is likely to occur given what we know about a phenomena. And then, of course, it can also be the basis upon which people can make instructions about how you should behave, because they know from their theoretical understanding that if they tell you to do X, they can prescribe and efficiently get the outcome they want. So that's basically very simple starting off point. Of course, another issue that we need to be aware of is that in scientific terms, theory is not just built from the cloud. People don't just wake up in scientific terms. They don't just wake up and have an imagined explanation about how a phenomena works and so forth. They do that through a very systematic set of actions that occur, and these sections are normally referred to as the steps in theory development. These steps differ from book to book, from text to text, from different author to different author, but in basic terms, when you're developing a theory, you become aware of the concepts, the small variables or factors that matter in relation to the phenomena that you are looking at. Then once you know what those factors are, which we now call the concepts, you are able to then make a statement about how those concepts exist and how they are related. Then, of course, once you've developed that statement about the concepts and what concepts matter, how they matter, you're able to then put forward a more specific theoretical position to explain whatever the phenomena is. Then the latter part is you testing the theory. So essentially, even when you do your study, your research study, your study will go through the same types of things, because remember, your study is ultimately about you answering a question so you can develop a theoretical understanding of what's going on. So when you do a literature review and you find out all the facts that matter, you are mapping out the concepts that matter. So essentially you are doing what is called concept development. Then statement development is once you have put together the things that matter, you are able to then put together the exact problem that you're interested in understanding, and that in this theory development step-by-step process becomes the statement development aspect. And once you have then studied whatever it is you're studying and you get a sense of what's going on, you put forward a theory about what you've seen, and that theory represents theory development. Then, of course, at the very end, people want to validate that the theory that they've put forward is indeed a fairly accurate explanation of the phenomena, and what they then do is they test that theory. These steps in theory development are articulated differently by different people, but the general sense and the direction of theoretical development is as what I've put forward here for your attention. Right, so when we think about theory, I've said that theory helps to explain, it helps to predict, but in a more systematic way in research, we argue that theory exists in three ways. There are three formats in which you are likely and will certainly have to deal with theory in your study. And these three ways are three very specific and progressive, very easy to understand ways, but nonetheless, they are important because they critically shape how you structure your study, how you go from how you go from putting together the concepts that relate to your study, how you go from taking those concepts, testing them, and how you use your findings to develop new knowledge. So the argument basically is that theory exists in 3 ways in your work, 3 specific ways. And each of those ways require a different type of theoretical application. So in different places, you apply different types of theories, you apply them differently, and you expect a different function from them. So they say theory exists as a paradigm, or theory exists as the lens in your study, and theory exists as new knowledge. I will break this down for ease. The next few slides actually do this for you, but for the purposes of this verbal presentation, I will very quickly explain. So when you say theory is a paradigm, you are actually saying theory offers you a sense of understanding what's going on and how the topic should be understood, and it is that which underpins your research design. So if you're studying the relationship between student success and their experience of their study, you may actually read up on this area and be very clear that, look, this is not an objective science, it is more of a subjective one. People's experiences of their learning is largely to do with their interpretation of what's going on, the way they socially construct things. Then you become very clear that, hang on, so in actual fact, if I were to describe what's going on in terms of the things that are going on in relation to my phenomena of interest, I would describe them in very qualitative ways. I would describe them in very constructivist ways. I would describe them in very interpretivist ways. So clearly that the theory application at the beginning of your study assists you to locate yourself within a paradigm, so you understand that this is a qualitative study, and therefore if it's qualitative, these are the research designs that are open to me. These are the ways of thinking about the problem that are open to me. So that theory being a paradigm is the background knowledge you possess about a topic and how that background knowledge helps to shape your decision about whether your study will be positivist, interpretivist, pragmatist, and so forth. So that's the first point at which you meet theory. Then the next point in your study where you meet theory is at the point at which it informs our understanding of the phenomena under investigation. So once you have decided that, look, this thing has come from a background of a very qualitative origin or genesis, then you think, okay, so if I'm going to study this problem, the type of lens I need to have will be located in qualitative research. The type of lens that I'm interested in is interested in depth more than numeric presence and so forth. So at that point, theory acts as a lens for you. And then finally, once you have looked at the problem and you've studied it and you get these results, the results can sit on their own and you can say, this is what I found, full stop, and leave. Or you may say, this is what I found, but this finding that I have puts forward a new theoretical understanding about what is going on. So at that point, theory acts as new knowledge. So remember, folks, we have 3 points at which theory presents itself in your study. First, theory is a paradigm. Secondly, it exists as a lens. Third, it exists as your vehicle for communicating the new knowledge that you've got. Now, all the things that I have described are explained here for much greater clarity. Should you, if you decide to pursue this further. But when we talk about theory as a paradigm, we're talking about how theory allows you to locate all the philosophical assumptions that you have about what you really think is real or not real, what we accept as the truth as we know it, the means by which we're going to investigate something, and the means by which we'll gather evidence. So you realize that when we talk about theory as a paradigm, we are already subscribing to issues such as ontology, epistemology, methodology, and methods, all of which are things that I've alluded to and spoken about thus far. So some of these questions that I've put here are to do with if you were wanting to understand much more clearly what theory as a paradigm involves. I've included a couple of slides that assist you with that, and they are on there, but they are to help you really with deconstructing the small elements of theory. Remember, I spoke about ontology. The theory as a paradigm mentions ontology, epistemology, methodology, and methods. And what I do here is I give you some of the constructs that are embedded in some of these paradigmic issues that you look at. So when people talk about epistemological constructs, they're talking about the way in which we make decisions about what constitutes valid knowledge. How do we, what is it, what are the methods, what are the schools of thought that we rely on to determine whether something is real or not real, and what to determine what knowledge is reliable and valid. And people will speak normally of 3 or 4 types of epistemological constructs. The first, which is positivism, the traditional mathematical sense of the world, that really in that positivist stroke objectivist world, the person who's an objectivist believes that meaningful reality exists out there, and that we as human beings just simply have to look for it. And we also argue that when you're a positivist, the truth is in the thing you're studying, and you can measure and quantify the properties of that thing. And regardless of whether you are tall, short, black, white, yellow, black, tall, thin, everything, the objective truth remains unchanged. But another type of epistemological construct is subjectivism, which really says that the meaning and our sense of what is real and not real emerges not because of the sub-object we are looking at, but it is imposed on that object by you, the person who is looking at it. So I can take $10 subjectivism. Objectivism argues that $10 is $10 and means the same to everyone on earth because it is $10. Subjectivism says that actually the reality that you see when you're given $10 is not dependent on the $10. It's dependent on you, the person who is looking at it. That if you're very rich, $10 looks like nothing. If you're very poor, it looks like everything, and so forth and so forth and so forth. That's what subjectivism is centered on. That look, the reality that you end up accepting as the truth is imposed on that object by you, the subject, or anyone who's assessing what's going on. Then constructionism really is another type of epistemology that argues that reality is socially constructed. So as you engage with the world and you build a sense of what's tolerable, what's good, what's bad, you construct a sense of how you understand things. So someone, for example, in a constructionist way of thinking, they would still look at that $10, but their sense of whether the $10 means something or not is derived from their social experiences. what they've seen $10 do, how they've seen other people respond to $10, that type of world. And that is an epistemological construct. It's one of the paradigms that you will meet when you're relating with theory. So when you are getting into your study, the first engagement with theory is theory in its format as a paradigm. So you are going to have to make decisions about which epistemological construct fits and relates to your work that you're doing. I've left out a particular construct here, which comes up later, and that epistemological construct is the one we call pragmatism, which is really this view that a pragmatist believes that the world and knowledge and everything that we look at is very complicated, so complicated that you can't resign it to being objectivist, you can't resign it to being subjectivist, you can't resign it to being constructivist, but what you can say is that actually the reality of what you see is an interplay of both of all these different epistemologies. So pragmatism is really where, when people talk about a methodology, they would say, look, pragmatism sits best, is the one epistemological construct that defines mixed methods research. So if you are looking at a problem, and as you engaged with the knowledge that exists around it, and you became very clear that, look, this problem really cannot be understood objectively or subjectively or in a constructionist way only. It can only be understood if we take all of these ways of thinking about reality and integrate them into understanding. And if that then becomes the basis for you saying that, look, this study and this focus lends itself to a mixed method type of study. Objectivism links itself to quantitative research. Subjectivism links itself to qualitative research, but a very specific type of qualitative research. And constructionism leads itself also to qualitative research, but a very specific type of qualitative research. So once again, I've got some questions here that allow you to further explore your epistemology should you wish to do so. Right. So remember, once you've made decisions about which epistemological space you believe your area that you're looking at is, that allows you to commit in some shape or form to the methodology that you will subscribe to. And once you subscribe to methodology X, say that methodology is quantitative research, then we know that by definition your methods and your methodologies and the tools that you use have to be appropriate to that very specific paradigm, epistemological space that you've chosen. And basically, these questions help you to bring that up a bit more. Now, I have done an example or two, and this already speaks to something that I've already spoken about, the fact that, look, we know that subjectivism and constructionism are all parts of, they are all to do with qualitative experiences. So you realize that when you are studying something that you believe lends itself to the interpretations and meanings that people attach to certain things, you know that, this is a type of constructionism that's going on here, but the constructionism that's going on is more to do with intellectual constructionism, where people construct the sense of the world through how they think about it. And that becomes the interpretative paradigm. And the key principle here, once again, is that it comes from subjectivity, is not objective, is not from objectivity, is not from pragmatism. So this was just an example of how theory as a paradigm can operate. I've done a similar sort of focus and look at how theory can operate as a paradigm in relation to studies, and look at the thing that you're studying is interested in variables that are numerically measured, and you analyze them through statistical procedures. And really what you are saying in this space is that numerical variables, the statistical procedures we're looking at, are all born out of objectivism, and objectivism is in the positivist paradigm. And once again, that then tells you very clearly that, okay, the concepts you're interested in align much more readily with quantitative research. So those are the ways in which we apply this. Of course, the final application is where you realize actually you have some subject fields that have the benefit of having both a qualitative presence and a quantitative presence, because when you were looking at the concepts behind them, you realize that actually this study has got both quantitative and qualitative elements in it. So by that definition, it becomes a much more mixed method study, which aligns with the pragmatist theoretical application. Now, remember I said, when you are looking at theory, it exists firstly as a paradigm. So your sense of how you understand the truth in relation to your topic, all of that was the paradigm element of how theory is applied. The next point at which you meet theory is where it operates as a lens. And as a lens, it helps to give us a way to explain what is going on when we are looking at things that we are looking at. And this part of theory as a lens is very closely aligned with theoretical frameworks. So when we say that, look, I'm going to study X, and this X that I'm going to study, my understanding of it has come from certain pioneering theorists, which in some cases, in this example, I would have given one of the pioneering theorists was someone who did behaviorism. Some would talk about deep learning and so forth. But those models and those theories that help you to have a background understanding of your topic, a background understanding of the theories that are the concepts that are relevant to your topic, all of that is the explanatory theories that you rely on to give you a sense of understanding of what you're looking at. Those are the theories that we see operating as theory in the form of a lens. So typically, if say, for example, all of you were to write about a study about discrimination in the workplace, how you write and understand that discrimination in the workplace will be guided by theories. So you might have a theory, says something called the social equity theory, that basically argues that, look, everyone, if you want to derive great performance from people, and they must all feel equal regardless of their apparent difference within the workplace. So that theory, if you use it, it becomes the lens by which you operate and see things. Then, of course, there are other theories, like there's a theory on from novice to expert. It's by Benner, and this theory basically puts forward the view that not all workers are equal, and some workers are greater by virtue of their experience and by virtue of how much of an expert they've become in that field. So if you were someone who was to look at discrimination in the workplace, depending on which of those two theories have informed you, the way in which you look at equality in the workplace would differ. One lens is putting forward the view that equality is a given and everyone should be the same. And if you don't give it, you are doing something fundamentally wrong in the workspace. But another theory that we've looked at has put forward the view that, look, not all workers are the same. Some deserve much more experience because they are experts. Some deserve less attention or positive attention, positive appreciation because they are novices. But if they stick at it, they have the opportunity to themselves become experts. So that way in which you've seen this issue of equality is totally clouded by the theories that you have relied on to inform your understanding. Those theories, we call them lens. So in your own study, when we talk about a theoretical framework, we are saying, please tell us the lens by which you've seen your study. How did you, this thing that you're looking at, what are the theories that were critical in allowing you to understand and perceive it the way you are perceiving it? So that's theory as a lens. Then finally, theory as new knowledge. Now, this is interesting, but the sort of thing that sometimes students get lost in. So here's when you say theory as new knowledge, in your study, there are 2 points at which you have an opportunity to create new knowledge. Firstly, when you look at all the theories that help to shape the lens that you have, you may decide that, look, to understand this phenomena that I want to look at, there are 3 vaguely relevant or very relevant theories that I need to relate to. And you identify those theories and you write about them and you call those theories theoretical frameworks. But when you look at the 3 theories, you don't necessarily like every component of those 3 theories in understanding your phenomena. That may differ a little bit from how the 3 theories were created. So you may discover that certain elements of an existing theory you like, certain elements you don't like and you don't think they are relevant. So you take the relevant elements that you want to focus on and you make those your concepts of interest. They become your concepts of interest in your study. And of course, you might have 3 or 4 theories, and those 3 or 4 theories might have 3 or 4 concepts of interest to you. And in totality, when you add those theories of those concepts of interest, you then have a list of maybe 10 or so theories, concepts that you like. But those 10 concepts have not come from one theory. They've come maybe from 3 or 4 theories that you looked at. These new concepts that are now your new set of important variables or important concepts, they are what we call a conceptual framework. So the theoretical framework is all the theories that you have looked at to help you to create the lens by which you are going to look at your problem. But that lens will pick out. So there may be 3 or 4 theories you're relating to, and there may be 2 or 3 concepts from each of the theories that you like. So in total, there might be 6 concepts that you like, and those 6 concepts come from 3 or 4 different theories. When you join those 6 concepts to pursue an understanding of them in your study, then those concepts that you put together, you have brought yourself, they are called your conceptual framework. The theoretical framework are the 3 or 4 studies, 3 or 4 theories, 2 or 3 theories that helped you to formally understand your topic. But you know, they all help partially, but not all the way. They help in some way, but not perfectly. And so you pick the elements from those 3 theories that you like, and then you take those elements and you put them together into one new group, and that new group being all the concepts that you think matter to the field that you're and the topic you're interested in. And those new concepts that are put together are called a conceptual framework. When you generate that conceptual framework, it is a form of a new theory. So you have developed new theory in some shape. That first point at which you develop new theory is literally to do with using pre-existing theory to help you to adapt, revise, or confirm the theory that you want to put forward and the concepts that matter. So that process is you creating new knowledge, but you're creating it at the point of creating a conceptual framework. Once you've got that conceptual framework, usually the conceptual framework is presented as a visual presentation. So someone will have a page and they'll have a list of factors that matter, and the conceptual framework will be presented as a diagram. Normally it's graphically. Sometimes, well, after the people have given you the visual presentation, they then of course will explain those things and give main senses of what's going on. But that is your first point of creating theory, using theory in the process of creating new knowledge. Remember, once you have done that conceptual framework, you use the concepts in the conceptual framework as the subjects that you will be interested in when you're collecting data. So when you collect data now in the actual study that you've got, your data collection instrument will be exploring all the concepts that are embedded in your conceptual framework. So when someone says, how do I develop a questionnaire? How do I know what to include in my interview? You know what to include in your interview based on the concepts that you have included in your conceptual framework. So if there's a concept to do with happiness, there's a concept to do with motivation, then you know that, in my data collection instrument, I must ask questions that relate to happiness. I must ask questions that relate to motivation. So the conceptual framework is not only a grouping of the important elements of previous theory, but it also forms the theoretical point of reference for the data collection instrument that you will develop. All of that, the conceptual framework, when you develop it, it is a form of new knowledge. It didn't exist before, you've made it exist. Even though it's you copying elements of different theories, they've never been put together in the way you are putting them together. So that's your generation of a new type of theory, which we now call a conceptual framework. Now that conceptual framework helps you to develop your data collection instrument. You go and collect data, you find answers, then you think, these answers tell me more about what's going on. How can I take my answers and offer a theory about what's going on? That becomes your second point of developing new theory. So when I said that theory as new knowledge exists twice, it exists before data collection, as you put together your conceptual framework. It exists after data collection, when you take the outcomes of your analysis to formulate a new theory about what's going on. So those are the spaces. Then, of course, I've given some guidance here about conceptual frameworks, when they typically take place and so forth. This is useful for you to keep a hold of, but not necessary for us to conversate on now. So on your own, I've put together a student exercise that I hope you'll engage with. And you can look at this when you look at the slides. It's slide, I think it's my 19, it's slide 19. So if you remember, just jot down slide 19 has got a little exercise for you to do. And then of course, I was telling you about where theory applications happen. They happen in the phase where you're planning your study, you're conceptualizing your study, in informing you. They help you when you plan your study in terms of using the conceptual framework, and they help you also when you reflect on your study and you talk about what you have discovered and so forth. Now, these elements that are coming up here, I've put them on just to assist you. So you can remember that, look, when you're doing your study, you have the opportunity for theory to come in as a lens. So when you're deciding the topic, as a paradigm, when you're deciding the topic, how it should be looked at and so forth. As a lens, when you're collecting data and deciding which of your data options you'll utilize. As new knowledge when you're developing your conceptual framework and also developing an output theory from the end of your study. So those are the basic things that relate to theory. Now, I want to take you to the second part. The second part is very easy now. This is literally a 10-minute job because of the background you now have. In research, people constantly talk about theoretical frameworks, they talk about conceptual frameworks, and there's always very little understanding of what one is and what the other is and what one is not. So I tell you very clearly that a theoretical framework in a study is that set of existing theories that you think help you to understand your topic. The more complex your topic is, the more multidisciplinary your topic is, the more theoretical frameworks one will have. So in theory, we understand that if someone's doing a doctoral study by its very nature is more complicated. It involves many things from different fields. So someone will be studying student performance, and maybe they've got some stuff from psychology, they've got some stuff from management studies, they've got some stuff from finance, they've got some stuff from education. So in theory, the theories that help you to understand that topic may come from all these distinct fields. So essentially, your theoretical framework will have more than one theory that guides it. Therefore, your conceptual framework becomes you filtering out from the different theories, the small concepts that you like, and then you take those concepts and you put them together into this new construction that you believe is much more specifically meaningful to your topic. It's not meaningful to other related topics. It is tailor-made for your topic. That then becomes your conceptual framework. So every conversation, every slide that we have that says this is a theoretical framework, this is a conceptual framework, it is stating exactly the same as what I have just shown to you. The fact that a theoretical framework is that, I also go back and I tell you over and over and over again that it is about the relevant theory or theories that underpin the knowledge base of the phenomena that you are going to look at. So there's nothing new in these slides that I've put in here. And of course, when someone says, why is a theoretical framework important? It gives you a structure about how you decide which philosophy, which ontology you'll pursue, which epistemology you will choose, which methodology will work, and what methods will work for you. So that theoretical framework operates very exclusively in helping you to clarify what paradigm, source paradigm your work comes from. And of course, it is always linked to what you are studying. Certain things that you're studying by their very nature will be subjectivist, positivist, and so forth. I offer you some useful additional comments about the purpose and importance of theoretical frameworks and so forth. This also continues, and you will notice that you have slides that are basically talking about the theoretical framework and the things that I've already mentioned. But now people say, look, so Prof, how do I construct a theoretical framework of my study? So say what you need to do is to break down the topic of your study into the different fields that it provokes and verges onto. So if you're doing a study about student success and maybe to do with student contributions to success, then you know that, look, in this thing that I'm looking at, I will look at the research, and my reading tells me that success has something to do with biology, where people are inherently born with better mental acuity than others. Then you'll say, okay, research also tells me that success is a socialized thing. People who come from hard-working families, who work hard, who have a good work ethic, succeed. And then someone else will say, well, success is also to do with a bit of an cognitive process, interpretivist thing, where someone who believes they have a chance of succeeding will be motivated to succeed. So you've already figured out that the key variables in your study come from the world of psychology, the world of this, the world of that. So you now know that if you're going to look for theories that help to explain what's going on, you will have representation of a theory from psychology, a theory of motivation, a theory to do with biological hereditary, and so forth. Those are the processes by which you construct a theoretical framework. So those constructs, those variables that matter, you then say, how are those variables? What are the theories that help me to understand those individual variables? So bottom line, we don't have a given number, but I can tell you a number that is workable. If you're doing a master's study, we assume that a master's study is moderately complex. So you may have 2 or 3, maybe 2 theories that you have borrowed from to understand your topic. If you're doing a doctoral study, we believe that it's much more complex and people have anything from 3 to 5 frameworks, theoretical frameworks. But we generally discourage you from having 20 theoretical frameworks because to bring them together becomes complicated. So you are also going to have to do some decision making about which theory is most inclusive and helps to describe your phenomena best. Rather than having 4 theories that say the same thing, you should choose the theory that you believe relates best to what you're studying so that you minimize and you have fewer theories to put together and to select important concepts from in the preparation of presenting this thing we call a conceptual framework. So remember, the phenomena you are looking at would have been different from the different phenomena that was looked at by the theorists who were speaking about the theories that you have borrowed from. So you will now have the new concepts that you think are best fit for your study. Then those concepts, when you put them together, they help you, they become your conceptual framework. They become the map that tells you that when I collect data, I want data to consider A, B, C, D, E concepts. And that's how you develop it. What is a conceptual framework to you may not always be a conceptual framework. So if I develop a conceptual framework for my study, and through some fortune, I'm able to publish that conceptual framework, and someone else reads my study, and then they use my conceptual framework as a theory that helps them to understand something. To them, my conceptual framework is a theoretical framework. But to me, it's a conceptual framework because it was unpublished. When I used it, it was a result of me joining up different variables from different places. So the next few slides elaborate further on what a conceptual framework is, very much in the spirit of how I've explained them. I've also said that, look, the conceptual framework brings together related concepts, and those related concepts become the things you want to collect data on. So it is the birthplace of your data collection instrument. And I've said that mostly they are presented as diagrams because you have a list of items from the different theories that you're looking at, and you want to show some type of spatial relationship between them. So that's how we present conceptual frameworks. The difference between the theoretical and conceptual frameworks, I think I've stated that over and over, but I present it here for your consumption and later reference when I'm not around. What I want to do as I'm closing this is this latter part, which I call the test driving the framework development process. In this test driving the framework development process, I've got a number of topics, number of potential phenomena, and I show you how I work through using each of the different types of options. I look through how each of the different types of phenomena can be utilized selectively to go from a theoretical framework to a conceptual framework. And I've included them here for your own personal work. So take, for example, this question. So someone will say, what are the factors that impact the uptake of substance misuse and substance relapse prevention counseling services? So this is a study. Someone wants to know, what are the things that contribute to whether someone decides to go and get help for their drug misuse or not? What are the factors? Then you ask yourself, so where are the theories that we're going to look at to understand this phenomena? Where do they come from? Firstly, we think, okay, as I read this, when someone decides to uptake something, that's a product of motivation. So maybe there's a theory about motivation. Then somebody will say, look, you positioned substance misuse as a problem, but not all cultures think drinking and being merry is a problem. So maybe this thing is also leaning on health beliefs. So already there are two theoretical foundations that help us to understand this. One being a motivational theory of sorts, and one being a theory that looks at health belief. And already you see, this is a hunch. The hunch is that, okay, this thing I'm studying borrows a little bit from the health belief model, a little bit from the hierarchy, from the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which talks about motivation. So we go to these three things and you look at them. And here's the first one. The health belief model has got all these concepts. And you might decide that, look, for my study, I'm only interested in the issue to do with modifying, maybe the issue to do with people's perceived severity of substance misuse. People will want to do something if they think it's serious, or they'll want to do something about it if they perceive that it poses a real threat to them. Some people will drink and think, oh, this drinking issue is only a problem for weak human beings, not me. So from this health belief model, out of these 7 or 8 different boxes and circles, you might only want 2 of them for your study. So those become things that you now graduate to your conceptual framework, and then maybe you will now look at the other model, which I comes here, which is the the motivational theory, which we forgot about, and it's not included here. It comes up a bit later, and that theory relates to what motivates people. So you might discover that people are motivated by the need to fulfill certain requirements that they have. So if someone has no food, they are motivated to strive hard to gain food so they survive. if they have no security, but if they have no food, no security, no spiritual health, no this, they will prioritize the most life-threatening of those things to deal with and worry less about others. So maybe one of the theories that helps you to understand this is a theory that, look, why would someone bother themselves with worrying about substance misuse if they don't have money in their pocket? So those become theoretical foundations of your study, but in your study, you may decide that you're only picking 2 or 3 concepts from each, and you're joining those concepts together to come up with a brand new concept, which is called conceptual framework. What I've done for you is in the latter part where I say test drive this, there are several. There are at least 3 or 4 different examples that you can play with. And I invite you to look at those in your spare time and just consider them as possible areas that possible examples of how you identify a theoretical framework and how you move from theoretical framework to conceptual framework. With that said, I want to now move to the issue of, I want to take us to the issue of questions and so forth. There we go. Now we are into the subject of questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Right, okay, and go to the questions and answers that have been presented to me. Right. Right. Okay. Now I'm hoping. Wait. Right. We are going to have this open in a second. I was having. Right. Okay. Let's see if I can move across. Right. I'm having a little bit of problem with bringing up the questions, but I have them. Right, so the first question, good evening, Prof. What is the step-by-step of using theory as a lens for your study? So there's a slide, I think it's probably about slide 6 or 7. So this question may have been asked before I got there, but when you talk about theory as a lens, we are looking at theory as, we are literally saying, look, theory as a paradigm is the ontology and epistemology of your study. That helps you to choose the paradigms where your study rests. But once you have made that decision about whether your study is objectivist, subjectivist, pragmatist, then you are making plans about how you are going to look at your study or study your focus. And those plans are to do with your choice of methodologies, your choice of methods, your choice of data collection approaches, your identification of the subjects that you will have. So that process of narrowing down from the big design questions to the very small questions that tell you about which individual you will collect data from, those are your step-by-step uses of theory as a lens. Right. What are the epistemological constructs of interpretivism and critical realism? Okay. We have different levels of theory. Hey, we have different levels of theory. People talk about great theories, major theories, and then people talk about meso theories, middle of the road theories. Then people talk about micro theory. So I think where Paul's question seems to be asking for me to explain two theories that don't belong in the same world as each other. So interpretivism is considered to be a grand theory. It's considered to be a grand theory because it is a big mama, big daddy type of theory that really helps us to understand the world, and it's one of 4 or 5 that are the big ones. The big ones being objectivism, subjectivism, social constructivism, under which interpretivism is somewhere in the world of constructionism, and then of course pragmatism. So those are different levels of theories, and they represent a very different layer of epistemology from something like critical realism, and critical realism is almost used as a small theoretical space that it almost can be identified as a methodology, that people will say, look, the method that I will use to understand this is based and driven by critical realism. So it's a kind of qualitative approach in which critique and questioning of reality as it is seen becomes the mode of data collection, the mode of understanding the data. So really those two constructs, if you're being purist about theory, don't belong together. It's almost like trying to compare, if someone was to say, let's compare different worlds, then you asked me to compare Mars to a city in a country. The two things are worlds, but different worlds at very different levels. So Mars is a world in terms of the solar space, that it is one of the planets, but a city is a world in that it's one of the small things that exist in those planets. So interpretivism and critical realism are like that. They're a little bit not comparable, but there we go. So, and folks, remember, you are not required to go to this level of depth with your work. Sometimes you will meet a supervisor who has a particular interest in something and they hone in on it. But your only decision to choose something should not be driven by them. Your research question should tell you what is the best way to understand the world that you have in front of you. Good evening, this is from Lungi. Please explain the difference between the theoretical and conceptual framework. I think that question was asked at 6:32. Between that time and now, I have maybe told the difference at least 8 or 9 times. So I'm hoping Lungi is now attended to. But since we cannot leave our subjectivism outside our study, how much is allowed? So remember, it depends on what paradigm you've decided to adopt as your paradigm that explains your reality. So if you take an objectivist paradigm, that paradigm makes a strong assertion that there is no such thing as subjectivity, that everything is an objective truth. But not every subject can be subjected. Not every topic you look at aligns with that type of thinking. So if someone was carrying out a study and the study was interested in knowing how many people get a diagnosis of COVID-19, the number you get is not subject to subjectivism. It's either 10 or 20, whether you were a tall person who was doing the testing or not, or short or whatever, the number will be the same if you've used the instrument correctly. So that type of topic does not have a subjective provision in it. But the different types of studies that accommodate subjectivism give you a number of options by which you accommodate your own subjectivist impact on a study. So, like in phenomenology, people will talk about a concept called bracketing. Bracketing being that, look, if you're studying something and you realize that, look, the reality you see has more to do with you than the thing you are looking at. And if you believe that, in phenomenology, they say you must then declare and announce all the limitations and the things that affect your ability to analyze something. Have you been affected by this? Do you support it already? Have you come in with pre-existing prejudices? And then you take those things and you note them and you bracket them. So when you are studying a concept, you keep checking yourself to see if some of your conclusions are affected by the things that you brought to the table in yourself. But all of that, so the subjectivist world allows for that, and it offers lots of frameworks to deal with that. And when we deal with the different traditions of subjectivist research, we will get into that. It is my request to having clear difference between the two terms, conceptual and theoretical framework in literature. So, folks, many, probably more than a half of every researcher that you'll meet does not know the difference between theoretical and conceptual frameworks, but you do. So the literature may not always be clear, but you are clear. And there are some concepts in research that evade even people who write about them. Theoretical and conceptual frameworks is one of those. It evades many people. There are some who have even gone as far as publishing books, and the books are misinformed, but you are not misinformed. You now have clarity. So if you read things and some places will put conceptual stroke theoretical framework, in actual fact, it's either something's either a theoretical framework or a conceptual framework. It's not one or the other. You now know that, but the literature may not always have that clarity. How detailed, someone's asking about how detailed a conceptual framework should be. Folks, the detail of your conceptual framework depends on the theories that inform your understanding. So if your theories that you're looking at are maybe theories with 50 concepts and another has 70 concepts, and you choose both of them to inform you, and you choose 30 items from each, then chances are you also end up with a very rich conceptual framework. So it is up to you to make a decision about the level of study you're in, feasibility issues, so you can decide whether the foundational theory you found has got too much detail and not enough grand things. Because you can get a theory about success that has 72 factors in it, then another one that will have 4 grand factors. So the decision now is, do you choose the 72 one or the 4 one? And you make that based on your feasibility of your study. When do you development? There's a question being asked about conceptual frameworks, folks. So you must go back later on. You're going to have a session that talks about, remember I told you where conceptual frameworks exist, that your theoretical framework and your theory, you'll meet it, all tends to be around the literature review, at the latter part of a literature review. But in bigger studies, it's a standalone chapter. So you will have a chapter after the literature review where you are considering just the theoretical contributions that relate to your study. Are we supposed to apply both TF and CF at doctoral level? No question. You can't exist. The TF, remember, theoretical frameworks are just loose theories that inform elements of your study. So you can't take them as they are. You have to take elements of them and use only the elements. And once you do that, you have created a conceptual framework. So there is no choosing one or the other. The both things exist, but they serve different purposes. Does one also need to adopt a theoretical and conceptual study in a qualitative study? Wow. Yeah, so folks, please You know, sometimes what you really need to do with your studies is you have to apply, you have to sit down and actually think your study through. That, look, I am going to have a problem. I need to understand this problem. To understand the problem, I'm going to use theories to guide me. When I've used those theories to guide me, those theories will also tell me what questions exist and what's been answered and what's not. But those theories will also tell me what will matter if I want to understand these questions. So already you're realizing that actually the theoretical framework, the formal theoretical framework and the conceptual framework will definitely come after the literature review. But remember, theory appears in three ways. So there's a point at which it appeared as a paradigm, it appeared as a lens, it appears as new knowledge. So you recognize then that that even tells you the order in which things appear. But a lot of it is you subjected to thinking. You have previous studies in front of you that you have access from your department. Look at them and understand how people have positioned things. Does a research need to have a conceptual framework? Can you stop? No. So look, at the level of research, CISO has asked if research needs to have a conceptual framework or can you stop at a theoretical framework only? If you are studying something that's exactly what someone else studied before and what someone exactly gave a theory on, then that theoretical framework needs no conceptual framework. But the question is, why would you study something that has been studied? So essentially, the minute you find that your theoretical framework is an exact replica of what you want your conceptual framework to be, you are literally doing what's called a replica study. And we advise against those at the level that you're at. How do you measure or test the conceptual framework? You don't measure. Whoa. Okay, this question, I'm not sure whether the person has misunderstood certain things. So remember, a conceptual framework that you develop is literally you assessing things that you believe are relevant concepts to the thing you are studying. Then you use those things to create a data collection instrument. Then you collect the data. So you've never really at any point tested the conceptual framework. You may come out at the other end with a theory about what's going on, and you want to know if that theory is a reliable explaining capacity for your work. At that point, you can test the theory, but you are not testing the conceptual framework. Does the use of articles that are less 5 years old apply when writing a theoretical framework? No. Colleagues, dear students, there's a misconceptualization about how 5 years works. This thing about many supervisors will blindly say to you, make sure your studies are less than 5 years. It is not a useful guide to students, and I'll tell you why. So all we ask of you is that you must use the most recent and relevant source of data to explain what you're looking at. And somehow people had figured out that 5 years is kind of a good number. But it isn't a rule. It's just a bad thing that's been said so many times. It's become reality. It's not. The interest is that we want you to show that you've looked at recent theory and research from your field. If I were going to look at how epidemics work, and COVID had not happened, the last epidemic that we had in the world, or pandemic that we had in the world, was 100 years ago. So for that particular topic, even studies that are 100 years old would have worked. But if I ask you to look at advances in in computing theory and so forth, then you'll find that something that's even 18 months is too old. So 5 years no longer applies. 18 months is the cutoff for that topic. So the issue about deciding what's relevant and what's not is not determined by 5 years. It's determined by the nature of your topic. And then theoretical frameworks depend on if there's a seminal theory that was developed in 1920, but it still guides how we see and perceive certain things, then you use it. So it's not subjected to the 5-year rule. We usually have a challenge in human-centered technology. How do you know when you need to find a multidiscipline or you need to find multidisciplinary theories? How to marry theories from different disciplines? Look, firstly, no topic is a master's or doctoral study if it comes from one discipline. We know, just as a basic rule, that human problems are complex, human problems are multi-subject, human problems are, so when you focus at master's and doctoral level, it is a given that the fields that you'll look at will be more than one field. It will be dominated by the subject you're in. So you could have a question on English because you are an English major, but it may have an element of sociology in it, might have an element of psychology in it, and so forth. But and the marrying of theories, that's what you do, that only through reading and understanding how things are connected. So if someone talks to you about success, you realize that our understanding of success is driven by 10 theories and so forth and so forth. To what extent should the conceptual framework be newer than the theoretical framework? Colleagues, I think I've answered that question. And remember, the conceptual framework is designed by you on the day you join the theoretical framework. So you're not going to get a conceptual framework that's from 2021. The conceptual framework will be from Tuesday, August 1 in 2023, because you are developing it. It's not developed by anyone else. But the theories you use will come from various years. Yeah. How do we start literature first or theories first? Because most articles do not have theories. All subject fields have theories. So there's someone who's asking how we start with literature first or theories first when most articles don't have theories. The answer is that you shouldn't just be reading articles. You should be reading source material, textbooks on topics. There are articles that are secondary literature reviews, discussion papers. Even the articles that you look at themselves will have a literature review section that has a theoretical component. So they are theories, but you just can't limit yourself to articles. What if there are no pre-existing theories for your research study? It is impossible. It is impossible that you can study anything that has no theoretical basis. Every topic that you know and understand in your world has some theoretical basis, whether that is direct theory or what we call inferential theory. So if, say, for example, you are going to study a topic that had never been studied before, there will be other topics that bear similar hallmarks to that topic. And you would take theory from that and refer to it in terms of it being inferential literature. Where we focus to develop CF in the mixed method study. I don't know, I'm not sure. There's a question here, but I think it's written, the English escapes me a little bit. Remember, the conceptual framework has nothing to do with whether your study is mixed methods or not, because you won't have made that decision yet. When you decide your conceptual framework and the framing, you've not made a decision. Actually, it is the conceptual framework that will give you a sense about whether or not your study has the chance. Yeah. And then finally, apologies for the typo. The question is, when do you develop a conceptual framework and where do you feature it in your chapters? So folks, it depends. You must go to your specific department and understand where they put conceptual frameworks. But in a standardized dissertation, chapter 1 is your introduction and overview of the study. Chapter 2 is your literature review. Chapter 3 is the theoretical foundation of your study, which is the conceptual frameworks and the theoretical frameworks. Chapter 4 is your methodology. But some departments will say, no, take your literature review and your conceptual frameworks and put them into one. So just go and check where it sits. Then, of course, we close with the perfect last thing, saying excellent presentation, Prof. This was very informative. Thank you, Anna. There's a final saying, are you familiar with Bossadi theorization? I'm very, very familiar with Bossadi theorization, but it is not. So I spoke about different types of theories, that they are grand theories, there are meso theories, then there are micro theories. Bossadi theorization is not a theory in terms of research understanding, it becomes an explanatory theory. So if, say, for example, you were to understand a topic and you believed that the topic had a feminist approach to it or a womanist approach to it, and the theory that you thought informed you, one of the theories was Bossadi theorization, then you would take the concepts that are in it and put it in. But in actual honesty, it's we were talking about grand theories, and Bossadi theory is more of a day-to-day usage theory, and by that I mean it becomes one of your theories that you will include in your theoretical framework, much like the health belief model that I shared with you, the theory of motivation and so forth. So it isn't a grand or meso theory in that respect. Yeah, right. Folks, before I close up, the thing about theory is you need to read this, eh? You cannot, many people attend these sessions and want to answer all their problems around theoretical and conceptual frameworks from a lecture. And no matter how good the lecture is, you will never put it all together unless you revisit the content I gave you, go out there, look at your field and say, right, I now need to know, when I say I understand this topic, where did I borrow my theories? What theories drove my understanding? And then you now begin to develop a theoretical framework. And until you do that, and to do that, by the way, you may have to read 70 different theories before you say these are 3 that matter to me. And many people want a shortcut to getting to that. And unfortunately, if you want to really do it well, you have to go around the long route. So here's hello, Prof. Thank you so much for the explanation. Can we pick 3 theories? Yes, no, you can pick 3 theories from the same place, but remember the 3 theories that you've got maybe from the same discipline, but they are looking at the topic you're focusing on from a different space. So you may have a theory, you may have 3 theories of motivation that are all from the same discipline, but they argue that motivation is controlled and is a result of different factors. So it's possible that it can be from the same space. Right, with that said, I think we have covered as many of these questions as we can. I think we've done exceptionally well, and we are 1 minute away from 7:30. In actual fact, it is 7:30, and I want to thank you all for availing yourself for this very critical session that you probably need to listen to again to get a better sense of it. And I always also tell people that I think I do a decent job. I do a decent job of explaining this, but this decent job doesn't always feel decent to everybody. And so you may have to listen to a different way that this is presented to get it. But the one thing you must know for sure is don't stop until you get that presentation that does it for you. It's one of the set of concepts you can't really do a master's or a doctorate without understanding. It's just impossible. It's literally like driving a manual car without knowing how to change gears. It will catch you at some point. And what I do think is that, I present this online and there's thousands and thousands of people who watch this particular session because of the fact that they realize it's a trouble spot. They also kind of relate to the way that it's explained. But once again, always treat the program and the facilitation as one of the many different sources of guidance. And for me, the more the merrier, but just keep at it. Just don't stop there. Right. Okay. On that note, I want to thank you again. It's 7:31. I think I may have spoken a little too much and I should be saying good night. Thank you. Good night to everybody.